to good health and fortune. Eat, my friend, there is plenty for everyone.
Thank you. This feast is truly a blessing.
Imagine two men. One of them has everything money can buy. Fine clothes, the best food, a house full of comfort, and a life free from worry. The other man has nothing, not even his health. He sleeps outside, right at the first man's front gate, hoping someone might toss him a few crumbs. They live just a few feet apart. And yet, they might as well be living in two completely different worlds. This is one of the most powerful stories ever told about wealth, poverty, and what really matters in the end. It comes from the Bible, from the teachings of Jesus, and it's called the story of the Rich Man and Lazarus. It's short, but it's one of those stories that, once you hear it, you don't forget. So let's slow down and tell it properly, from the beginning. Let's start with the rich man. We don't know his name. The story never tells us. What we do know is how he lived. Every single day, he dressed in purple and fine linen. And back then, that wasn't just nice clothing. Purple dye was incredibly expensive, reserved for kings, nobles, and the seriously wealthy. Wearing it every day was like flying first class every single flight, or driving a different luxury car each morning, just because you could. And it wasn't only about looking rich. The story tells us he feasted sumptuously every day, not once in a while, not on holidays or special occasions. Every day was a banquet. Every day was abundance. Picture his home, warm light spilling from the windows in the evening, the smell of roasted food drifting into the street, laughter and music from inside. A life with no gate closed to him, except, ironically, the one gate that led outside. Because right at that gate, the entrance to this man's home, lay another man. His name was Lazarus. And this detail matters more than you might think, because in this entire story, Lazarus is the only character who's given a name. Not the rich man, just the poor beggar at the gate. It's as if the story is quietly telling us, this is the man worth remembering. Lazarus was covered in sores. He had no strength to fend for himself. Every day, he was laid at the rich man's gate, hoping for scraps, anything that might fall from the rich man's table. Not a seat at the table, not a warm meal handed to him with care, just the leftovers, the crumbs that no one else wanted. And it gets harder to picture. The story tells us that dogs would come and lick his open sores. In that culture, dogs were considered unclean, wild scavengers roaming the streets. So the image we're left with is about as low as a human being could be brought. Sick, hungry, ignored, and even animals treating him as if he were already gone. Here's what's chilling about this story, though. The rich man isn't described as cruel. He doesn't kick Lazarus away. He doesn't insult him or have him removed. He simply does nothing. He walks past him, every single day, in and out of his own gate, past a suffering human being, without seeing him, without truly seeing him, at all. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable part of this whole story. It's not really about cruelty. It's about indifference. It's about how easy it is to walk past someone's pain when it's not our own. Two men, a few feet apart, living in entirely different worlds. And then, one day, everything changes. Lazarus dies first. There's no funeral described, no mourners, no mention of anyone even noticing he was gone. In the eyes of the world, a poor, sick beggar simply stopped existing at someone's gate. But notice what the story says happens next. Lazarus is carried by angels to sit beside Abraham. Now, if you're not familiar with the name, Abraham was considered the father of the Jewish faith, a symbol of God's promise, of blessing, of belonging to God's family. To be carried by angels to Abraham's side wasn't just a nice way of saying he went to a peaceful place. It was the picture of ultimate honor. The man nobody honored in life is welcomed like royalty in death. Then, sometime later, the rich man dies too. And this time, the story does mention something the world would expect. He's buried. probably with a grand funeral, probably remembered fondly by many, with fine words spoken over his grave, just as fine as the linen he used to wear. But here's where the story takes its first real turn. The rich man opens his eyes, and he's in torment. He's in a place of fire and anguish, the story says, suffering deeply. And when he looks up, far in the distance, he sees Abraham. And right beside Abraham is Lazarus. The same Lazarus who once lay at his gate, covered in sores, begging for scraps. Now comfortable, now at peace. Now, in a strange and painful twist, the rich man is the one who needs help. He calls out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." Stop and notice something important here. Even now, even in torment, the rich man still sees Lazarus as beneath him. He doesn't ask Abraham to rescue him personally. He asks for Lazarus to be sent, like a servant, to bring him relief. Old habits, it seems, die hard, even after death. And Abraham's answer is calm, but it lands heavy. "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony." There's no anger in Abraham's words, no shouting, just a simple, sobering truth. Life isn't the final word. What felt permanent, the comfort, the luxury, the ease, was only temporary. And what felt like a life of suffering for Lazarus wasn't the end of his story either. Then Abraham adds something even more final. Besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. A chasm, a permanent gap, the kind that can't be bridged, can't be crossed, no matter how much anyone might wish it could be. And this is where the story asks us to sit with something uncomfortable. Some choices, some patterns of living, can't simply be undone once life is over. The time to change was before. Now here's where the story does something unexpected. The rich man, faced with this permanent separation, doesn't argue. He doesn't protest his suffering. Instead, his mind turns somewhere else entirely. He thinks of his brothers. "Then I beg you, Father," he says, "send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment." And in a strange way, this is the most human moment in the whole story. For the first time, the rich man isn't thinking only about himself. He's thinking about the people he loves, still walking around back home, still living exactly the way he used to live, still walking past their own version of Lazarus at the gate, without a second glance. He knows what's coming for them, because he lived it himself, and he doesn't want them to end up where he is. But Abraham's response is striking. They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. In other words, they already have everything they need to know right from wrong. They have the teachings, the warnings, the wisdom passed down for generations. It's already been said. It's already available. They don't need a miracle. They need to actually pay attention to what they already have. But the rich man pushes back. "No, Father Abraham," he says, "but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." He's convinced that something dramatic, someone rising from the grave, some jaw-dropping sign, would finally make his brothers wake up and change. And Abraham's final words close the story with a quiet, piercing truth. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Think about what that really means. It's not that people need more evidence, more miracles, more dramatic proof. Often, they already know what's right. The truth has already been placed in front of them. What's missing isn't information, it's a willingness to actually respond to it. And with that, the story ends. No dramatic rescue, no last-minute redemption. Just a closed door, a permanent chasm, and a warning left ringing in the air for anyone still alive to hear it. So, why does this story still matter, all these centuries later? On the surface, it looks like a story about the afterlife, about heaven and torment, comfort and fire, and it is that, in part. But if you only take it as a story about what happens after we die, you might actually miss its real punch. Because this story isn't really about Lazarus at all. Lazarus barely speaks. He does nothing dramatic. He simply exists, suffering, ignored, and then finally honored. The real focus of this story is the rich man, his choices, his blindness, his missed opportunity. Notice something important. The rich man isn't condemned for being wealthy. Nowhere does the story say wealth itself is evil. What the story exposes is what his wealth did to his ability to see other people. He had a beggar at his own front gate, not a stranger halfway across the world he could claim ignorance about, but a suffering human being close enough to reach out and touch, and he simply stepped over him, day after day, until stepping over him became normal. That's really the heart of this story. It's not asking, how much do you have? It's asking, who are you walking past? Because most of us aren't rich in the way this man was rich. But almost all of us have a gate. A moment where we see someone in need, maybe not a beggar covered in sores, but someone lonely, someone struggling, someone quietly asking for a little bit of our time or attention. And we choose to look away, telling ourselves we're too busy, too tired, or that it's simply not our problem. The story doesn't ask us to feel guilty for having comfort in our lives. It asks us to stay awake, to notice, to let what we have soften us toward others, instead of numbing us to them. And there's a second layer here too, that line about Moses and the prophets, about how the brothers already had what they needed to change, if only they'd pay attention to it. That's a challenge for anyone listening, no matter what they believe. So often, we wait for some grand sign, some dramatic wake-up call, before we're willing to change the way we live. But maybe, deep down, most of us already know exactly what we should be doing differently. We don't need more proof. We need the courage to actually act on what we already know. And somewhere out there, right now, there's probably a gate in your life too, someone easy to overlook, someone close enough to help, if only you chose to actually look up. This story was told a long time ago, but it hasn't aged a single day. Because the truth is, every generation has its rich men walking past their own gates. And every generation has its Lazarus, waiting, hoping to be noticed. Maybe the real question this story leaves us with isn't what happens after we die. Maybe it's simpler and harder than that. It's this: who's at your gate right now? And what will you do about it while there's still time to do something?